I thought the worst day of my life was when I found my husband's secret second phone, but I was wrong. The worst day was when I realized it was meant for me, and the conspiracy it revealed was far deeper and more sinister than I could have ever imagined. My name is Sarah, and for 5 years I believed I had a solid, if not perfect, marriage to Mark, a charismatic and ambitious financial analyst of 32. I'm 30, a graphic designer who had carved out a comfortable niche for myself, valuing my independence and the creative control I had over my life. I thought we balanced each other out. My sometimes chaotic creativity tempered by his methodical nature, his occasional rigidity softened by my spontaneity. Our main point of contention, much like in many marriages, was children. I wanted to wait to focus on my career and enjoy our freedom a little longer. He was increasingly eager to start a family, his biological clock, as he put it, ticking louder than mine. We had arguments, some heated, but they always ended with him sighing and saying he respected my timeline. Or so I had believed. The cracks started to show, not with a bang, but with a series of barely perceptible shifts. Mark began working later hours, citing a major portfolio restructuring at his firm. His personal phone, which used to be left casually on the coffee table while he cooked dinner, was now a permanent appendage, protected by a complex password that changed with an unsettling frequency. When I'd ask about his day, his answers were vague, rehearsed snippets about market volatility and client meetings that felt hollow. My gut, that primal instinct women are so often told to ignore, started humming a low, persistent note of anxiety. It was a feeling of being watched even in the privacy of my own home. The discovery happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, a day that now feels plucked from a psychological thriller. I was engaged in the semi-annual torture of deep cleaning, a chore I detested and thus neglected for months. While vacuuming under our king-sized bed, the hose caught on something sturdy. Annoyed, I got on my knees and reached into the dust bunny abyss, my fingers brushing against cold, smooth plastic. I pulled out a sleek new smartphone, sealed in a generic black protective case. It was powered off. My heart, which had been beating a steady rhythm, suddenly hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't his work phone, and it certainly wasn't his personal iPhone, which was charging on the nightstand, blinking with a notification. A cold dread washed over me, followed by a sickening surge of curiosity. Was this the cliché I had always feared? Was my husband having an affair? With trembling hands, I took the phone to my home office, plugging it into an old charger tucked away in a drawer. As it powered up, I felt a surreal disconnect, as if I were watching myself in a movie. The phone booted to a generic home screen. To my surprise, it had no lock screen security. It was almost sterile, utilitarian, with very few apps. A messaging application I didn't recognize with a simple blue icon, a maps application, and a photo gallery. No social media, no games, no email. I opened the gallery first. My blood ran cold, freezing the very air in my lungs. It wasn't filled with pictures of another woman, of clandestine dinners or hotel rooms. It was filled with pictures of me. Dozens of them. Candid shots. Me leaving my office building, squinting against the sun. Me laughing with my friend Emily over coffee at a downtown cafe, a moment I remembered vividly from 2 weeks prior. Me loading groceries into my car at the supermarket, looking tired after a long day. They were all taken from a distance with a long lens, the quality sharp and professional. The timestamps ranged over the past 3 months, a meticulous visual diary of my mundane life. This wasn't an affair. This was surveillance. This was stalking. Terror, sharp and acidic, rose in my throat. I then opened the strange messaging app. There was only one conversation thread, with a contact saved simply as J. The messages were cryptic, clinical, but their meaning was horrifyingly clear. J. Is the subject adhering to the scheduled routine? Mark. Yes. Morning route unchanged. Coffee at 8:15, arrives at office 8:45. Evening gym session Tuesday/Thursday *. J. Good. Phase 2 begins next week. Ensure the asset is in place. Mark, understood. She suspects nothing. Mood is stable. Cryptic. Asset. Phase 2. The words swam before my eyes. I felt the room tilt. My own husband was talking about me like I was a project, a target, a lab rat. I scrolled further back, my stomach churning, my fingers leaving smudges on the pristine screen. J. The medication adjustment is critical. Report any side effects. Mark. None to report. She's been more tired but attributes it to work stress. No changes in appetite or mood swings. J. Expected. Continue administration. Consistency is key. Medication. I wasn't on any medication except for my birth control pills. A new, chilling thought occurred to me, so while I almost dismissed it. For the last few months, I'd been feeling unusually fatigued and foggy-headed. I'd mentioned it to my doctor during my annual checkup, who'd run extensive blood tests that all came back normal. We'd chalked it up to burnout, the pressures of modern life. Now, a terrifying suspicion took root, ugly and undeniable. I ran to the bathroom and grabbed my current pack of birth control pills from the cabinet. The pills looked normal, tiny and white, but would I even be able to tell if they weren't? I thought of Mark's sudden, sweet insistence on making me my morning smoothie every day, a habit he'd started about 4 months ago. I remembered how he'd accidentally knocked my previous pill pack into the kitchen sink disposal a few months back, an incident that had seemed clumsy at the time but now felt calculated, forcing me to start a new one he'd conveniently already picked up for me from the pharmacy. I was shaking so badly I had to lean against the cool tiles of the bathroom wall. This was beyond betrayal. This was a conspiracy. A premeditated, ongoing violation of my body and my autonomy. And it had to be his older brother, John. John was a pharmacist. The pieces clicked into a horrifying mosaic. John had the knowledge and access to drugs. Mark had the access to me. They were working together. Panic threatened to consume me, a black wave rising behind my eyes. I couldn't breathe. But a survival instinct, fiercer than the fear, kicked in. I knew I had to act, but I couldn't tip them off. Confronting Mark directly would be dangerous, even foolish. I was living with a stranger who saw me as a subject. I needed irrefutable proof, and I needed help from someone outside this nightmare. I did 3 things immediately, my movements robotic but determined. First, I took the secret phone, wiped it clean of my fingerprints, and hid it in the inner zippered compartment of my purse. Second, I called in sick to work, claiming a sudden migraine, layering the lie over the terrifying truth. Third, I reached out to the only person I felt I could trust completely. My older sister, Clara, who lived 2 states away. I didn't give her details over the phone, my voice trembling as I simply said, "Clara, I'm in trouble. Mark. I think something is very wrong. I need you." She, without a moment's hesitation, simply said, "I'm on my way. Don't do anything until I get there." While I waited for her, trapped in the suffocating silence of the house that was no longer a home, I worked quickly. I copied all the data from the secret phone onto a secure, encrypted cloud drive I set up with a new email account. I took pictures of the pictures with my own phone, careful to capture the timestamps. I took screenshots of every single message exchange with J. This evidence was my only lifeline, my anchor in a reality that was rapidly dissolving. When Clara arrived hours later, her face was etched with a worry that deepened into grim fury as I showed her the phone and explained my suspicions. Her shock mirrored my own, but her military training, 8 years as an Army intelligence analyst, kicked in. She was calm, methodical, her mind already shifting from emotion to strategy. "We're not going to the police yet, Sarah," she said, her voice low and steady, a stark contrast to my ragged breathing. "Not until we know what phase 2 is. If we go now with this, it might not be enough." They could spin it as a paranoid wife, a husband being overly concerned or controlling. We need to know the endgame. We need to catch them in the act. Clara took charge. We devised a plan. I would pretend everything was normal. I would go to work, follow my routine, but I would be hypervigilant. I would stop consuming anything Mark gave me, especially the smoothies. I would secretly replace my birth control pills with a new pack from a different pharmacy across town. Most crucially, Clara had brought a small high-tech listening device from a contact of hers. A gadget that looked exactly like a standard USB wall charger. We planted it in the living room outlet, strategically placed to capture conversations in the kitchen and living area. We needed to hear their conversations to understand the scope of the plan. The following week was an exercise in unbearable tension, a performance where every smile felt like a crack in my soul. I played my part, smiling at Mark over dinner, listening to him talk about his stressful work projects, all while feeling like a mouse trapped in a cage with a snake, pretending not to notice its coiled presence. The listening device yielded little. Mark was careful, often taking calls in his home office with the door closed. But the secret phone, which Jay continued to message, was our window into their twisted plot. Jay, the asset is confirmed for tomorrow, 7 p.m. The subject must be en route to the gallery opening as planned. No deviations. Mark, she will be. I've insisted it'll be good for her to get out, that she's been working too hard. She agreed. Jay, the encounter must look natural. The trigger will be a blue scarf. Once contact is made, the sequence begins. Do not interfere. My blood turned to ice. They were planning something for the following night. I was indeed supposed to attend a friend's art gallery opening, a plan I'd mentioned to Mark in passing weeks ago. Clara and I looked at each other, the same grim understanding in our eyes. This was it. Phase 2 was a staged encounter. But with who? An asset? And for what purpose? What was the sequence? We're not running, Clara said, her jaw set in a hard line. Running means we live in fear, looking over our shoulders forever. We're going to turn their game against them. We're going to be the hunters. The next evening, I dressed for the gallery with a surreal sense of detachment. I chose a simple black dress, my hands trembling as I applied my lipstick. Mark was unusually attentive, helping me with my coat, his eyes gleaming with an excitement I now recognized as sinister, anticipatory. You look beautiful, honey. Have a wonderful time, he said, kissing my forehead. The gesture, once comforting, now felt like a brand. It took every ounce of my strength not to flinch, not to scream the truth in his face. But I wasn't going to the gallery alone. Clara was my shadow, my guardian angel. She followed me at a distance in a rented car, armed with a professional-grade camera that had a powerful zoom lens and a body recorder. The plan was for me to go to the gallery, act normally, socialize, and see who approached me with a blue scarf. Clara would document everything from the outside, capturing the asset, and if possible following him afterward. The gallery was crowded and loud, the air thick with the smell of wine, perfume, and the faint, sharp scent of turpentine. I felt exposed, every nerve ending on fire, every laugh from the crowd sounding like a threat. I clutched my glass of sparkling water, pretending to admire a large abstract painting, my eyes constantly scanning the room. And then I saw him. A tall, handsome man in his late 30s, with perfectly styled dark hair and an expensive-looking watch, weaving through the crowd with an easy confidence. And he was wearing a blue scarf, a splash of azure silk around his neck, despite the mild spring evening. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my temples. He made eye contact and smiled, a warm, disarming smile that didn't reach his cold, assessing eyes. He moved toward me with purpose. Sarah? Sarah, is that you? He said, his voice smooth and friendly. Mark said I might run into you here. I'm David, an old colleague from his golf club. He's told me so much about you. The lie was effortless, his delivery flawless. I played along, my smile feeling brittle, a crack in the porcelain mask of my composure. Oh, of course. David, it's so nice to finally meet you. We made small talk. About the art, about Mark's non-existent golf game, about the unseasonably warm weather. He was charming, intelligent, and he seemed genuinely interested in everything I said. It was a perfectly normal, pleasant conversation. And that's what made it so terrifying. It was too normal. What was the trigger? After about 10 minutes of inconsequential chatter, he glanced at his watch with a practiced gesture of regret. Well, it was a genuine pleasure, Sarah. I'm afraid I have to run to another engagement. But I'd love to continue this conversation sometime. Maybe coffee next week. He handed me a crisp white business card. David Chin, investment consultant. It looked legitimate with a raised logo and a downtown address. I took the card, my mind racing, trying to pinpoint what had just happened. What was this sequence? I stayed a while longer, making polite conversation with my friend, the artist, before making my excuses and leaving. The moment I was outside, gulping in the cool night air, I called Clara, my voice a shaky whisper. I got it all on video, she said, her voice tense. The whole thing. It looked completely innocent, like any other gallery chat. But I followed him when he left. Sarah, he didn't go to another engagement. He didn't go home. He drove straight to a private airfield on the outskirts of the city. He parked, went inside a hangar, and I lost visual. A private airfield? The plot had just thickened into something far more sinister and vast than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about tampering with my birth control or monitoring my movements for some twisted sense of control. This was bigger. This involved travel, resources, a level of planning that screamed of something professional. We retreated to the sterile safety of a hotel room Clara had booked under a fake name. We reviewed the footage she had taken from across the street. The encounter was benign, but Clara, with her analyst's eye, had zoomed in on something I'd missed. As David handed me the business card, his other hand had brushed, almost imperceptibly, against the sleeve of my trench coat. It was a fleeting, seemingly accidental touch. He planted something on you, Clara said, freezing the frame. We scrutinized the high-resolution video. There, on the dark wool of my cuff after he touched it, was a tiny, almost invisible speck, a fiber that glinted faintly under the gallery's exterior lights. It wasn't from my coat. Using the zoom, we saw him palm something minuscule from his own pocket during the handshake. A wave of nausea hit me. I took off the coat and examined the cuff under the harsh hotel lamplight. There, clinging to the wool, was a single strand of a strange, silvery metallic fiber. It was so fine it was almost impossible to see unless you were looking for it. Clara, using a pair of tweezers from her makeup bag, carefully removed it and sealed it in a plastic bag. We need to get this analyzed. This isn't amateur hour, Sarah. This is professional. This goes far beyond Mark and John playing a sick game. As if on cue, the secret phone in my purse buzzed. A new message from Jay. Jay, contact successful. Package delivered. Subject is returning to nest. Initiate cleanup protocol. Stand by for further instructions. Cleanup protocol. The term sent a fresh, paralyzing wave of fear through me. It was a term from espionage, from assassinations. What did that mean for me? Were they planning to harm me? To disappear me? The benign coffee date now felt like a death sentence. We knew we were catastrophically out of our depth. It was time to bring in the professionals, but we had to be incredibly careful. We couldn't trust the local police. What if they were involved? What if Jay had connections? Clara made a call to a man named Ben, a contact from her military days who now ran a discreet, high-end private security firm specializing in corporate espionage and counter-surveillance. She explained the situation in broad, alarming strokes. He agreed to meet us at a secure location first thing in the morning. That night was the longest of my life. I didn't sleep a wink. Every sound in the hotel hallway, the ice machine, the elevator ding, a distant door closing, made me jump. I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand, and the players were about to make their next move. The man I loved, the man I had shared a bed with for 5 years, was the one who had willingly placed me on the board. The meeting with Ben the next morning was in a bland, anonymous office space in a business park. Ben was a man in his 50s with a calm, weathered demeanor and sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. He looked like someone who had seen everything and was rarely surprised. We laid out our evidence like a prosecutor presenting a case. The secret phone, the messages, the photos, the video of the encounter with David, and the mysterious metallic fiber. He examined the fiber with a small portable spectrometer he carried in a briefcase. The device hummed softly. After a moment his face grew grim. "It's a synthetic protein marker," he said, looking from me to Clara. "Very advanced, military grade. It's not a tracker itself, but it can be detected and read with the right scanner. It's like an invisible barcode. They've tagged you." "Tagged me for what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, my hands clenched together to stop them from shaking. "For identification. For verification. Or for a swap," Ben explained, his tone clinical. "In extraction scenarios, you tag the target so the extraction team knows they have the right person in a crowd. This is high-level stuff. Industrial espionage, intelligence work, or a very sophisticated trafficking operation. The cleanup protocol likely means removing you from the picture once your purpose is served. Permanently." The room spun. Trafficking? Espionage? It sounded insane, like the plot of a bad movie. But the evidence was there, cold and hard. The professional photos, the coded messages, the tagged fiber, the private airfield. "Your husband and his brother aren't the masterminds," Ben continued, voicing the conclusion we were all reaching. "They're pawns. Assets just like you are. They're being used, probably promised money or something else they desperately want. The question is, by who and for what ultimate purpose? We need to find the puppet master." Ben proposed a dangerous but necessary plan. We would use me as bait in a controlled operation. We would let the sequence play out, but with Ben and his small, highly trained team monitoring my every move, surrounding me like an invisible shield. We needed to find out what the endgame was, to identify David and his handlers, and to gather enough evidence to bring the entire network down. It was a terrifying prospect, a walk into the lion's den, but I knew it was the only way to uncover the truth and ensure my safety permanently. There was no going back to a normal life until this was over. I had to go home. I had to face Mark. I had to pretend the last 24 hours of earth-shattering revelations hadn't happened. With Ben's assurance that his team would have me under constant surveillance, I walked back into my house that afternoon, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt like a ghost returning to the scene of its death. Mark was in the kitchen pretending to look over some papers. He looked up, a mask of anxiety on his face that I now saw right through. "Sweetheart. There you are. I was getting worried. You didn't answer my texts last night." "My phone died," I lied, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. "And I ended up staying at Clara's place after the gallery. We had a bit too much wine and lost track of time." I studied his face, looking for any flicker of suspicion, any sign that he knew I knew. He looked relieved, but there was a nervous energy buzzing beneath the surface, a gleam in his eye that wasn't from joy. "Oh good. I'm glad you had fun." He pulled me into a hug. His arms around me felt like being embraced by a stranger made of knives, each one poised to strike. "Listen, I have a surprise for you," he said, pulling back, his hands on my shoulders. "I've booked us a weekend getaway. Just us. A little secluded cabin upstate, right on the lake. No phones, no work, no distractions. We need to reconnect, Sarah. I feel like we've been drifting." The cabin. The isolated location. The perfect place for a cleanup. A cold, hard certainty settled in the pit of my stomach. This was where they planned to make their move. This was the culmination of Phase 2. I looked at my husband, the man who had vowed to cherish and protect me, and I saw a hollow shell, a puppet whose strings were being pulled by a shadowy organization I couldn't begin to comprehend. The man I loved was gone, if he had ever existed at all. Summoning every last bit of acting skill I possessed, I let a smile of feigned delight spread across my face. I reached out and touched his arm, a gesture that made my skin crawl. "A getaway sounds perfect, Mark," I said, my voice sweet, my eyes dead. "Just what we need. I can't wait." The trap was set. But this time I wasn't the prey. I was the bait in a trap of our own making. And I was no longer alone. The weekend at the cabin was coming, and with it the terrifying final act of my husband's betrayal. The battle lines were drawn and the war for my life was about to begin.